Where did you grow up, Dick?
17 miles north of Saco.
Okay. And who were your folks?
Alan and Gladys Marshall.
Okay. Did you have siblings in the house?
I had a brother. I had a sister that was more older than I, but she died when she was a baby.
Oh.
And then my brother was born. He was 14 years younger than I was. So
That's a pretty big gap. How was that if you were the only two kids in the house? Did you really feel like you grew up with a sibling, or he was just kind of a guy there as you were going out?
oh yeah, he was. I kind of raised him when he was little. Part of the time, I probably spanked him more than his mother did.
So, what was the house like back then? I would imagine that homes have changed a little bit.
Oh yeah, just a pretty small house we lived in. Wood heat in it. It could be a little cold sometimes. No insulation, and we lost everything, and we had the house and everything in the flood of 1952 when the Frenchman dam broke. And then we moved up to where we lived when I graduated from high school. Sean and Kelly Downing are living there now. So
Yeah. Did you get to know your grandparents?
I knew my granddad on my mother's side, and I knew my grandmother on my dad's side, and I never knew either one of my other grandparents. They died years and years before my dad's dad died when he was 40 years old.
Oh, really? That's awful young.
Yeah, and my mother's mother died in the flu in the 1930s, early 30s. She was only 40 years old, 30-some years old.
So your parents probably, well, were your parents grown then when they each lost a parent?
No, my mother was, I think my mother was 14 or 15 years old when her mother died. Her mother and her younger sister died of the flu. And my dad was, if I recall the story, I think he was like 14 or 13 or 14 when his dad died. He was the youngest one in the family, my dad was.
So they were old enough to remember him, but that's still pretty hard losing him.
Yeah.
Did that seem to affect your parents later on when you were growing up, or they just went on?
And just life went on. Didn't seem to bother him.
So did your two grandparents that you had, did they live close enough that you got to see them pretty regularly?
Well, my grandmother lived in Saco, so and then my granddad, he lived kind of around, worked for Broadbrooks in the summer times, and then he moved to over western. Him and my uncle Charlie, my mom's brother, moved over to Perma, Montana. That's Plains. And
I was gonna say, I think it's one of the few places in Montana I haven't heard of.
And then they lived in Plains for a while, and they moved to Oregon, and probably in 1954 or something like in there.
So you probably didn't get to see much of them after that.
Oh, we usually made it out there once or every 2-3 years.
How was travel getting all the way over to the West Coast?
Oh, it wasn't too bad. Didn't seem to be. But take off, and usually it was a 2-day drive. But
was the interstate up and going at that point, or was it? Well, I guess you wouldn't even hit that if you were going from here. Just be Old Highway 2 the whole way.
Yeah, we'd go different ways. We went through. I can remember going down to Pasco, Tri-Cities, and in that way, and then a couple times we went through Boise, the southern route. But it was at that time seemed to be a long trip, but it really wasn't as far as what you thought it was when you added up.
It was probably about 55 miles an hour, though. It probably wasn't all that fast.
No, it was. I think the first time we went over there was in 1955, and we had my folks, they had a fairly new car. It didn't take too long.
Were people still traveling by train around that time, or was it kind of dying off?
Well, there's train. I mean a train, but I don't. Only time I ever remember riding the train when I was little. I think my mom and I and Mrs. Johnny Valentine's mother, we went with her to Spokane on the train when I was like 4 or 5 years, 5 years old probably. After that, I never rode on a train again till I got drafted for physical in about 1962, 61.
So evidently the roads were good enough and the vehicles were common enough that everyone just kind of had their own way of getting around.
Oh yeah.
How was getting drafted?
Oh, it was in the middle of the winter, and it wasn't I think there was 18 of us left Malta, and we was on a train, there was 18 out of Malta, and 15 or 16 out of Wolf Point, and some out of Scobie. There was a whole trainload of us that ended up going to Butte, and we rode to Havre, and then from Havre they hooked us to Great Falls, and then in Great Falls they put us on the little old 2-car train that used to go to Helena, and then we bussed from Helena into Butte.
That must have been something, riding that little train through the mountains.
It was different. Yeah.
So which war was that then?
That was Vietnam was going pretty big.
What were you feeling? What were your feelings about the draft and the war? And
Oh, didn't give it much thought, I guess. Just when they called and said you were going, you went.
wasn't much choice in the matter, so it wasn't worth
Well, that
fighting
used
over.
to go get in the physical. No, you had to go down. I didn't pass the first physical. That horse had fell with me. I was working for Frank Locke, and horse had fell with me, and I was on crutches, so it didn't take long to kick me out. He sent me back, and about 8 months, I think I went back down there, and it still wasn't right, so finally the third time they just 4F'd me, and I didn't have to go. So,
How did you feel about that?
well, I guess it didn't give them much thought, and everybody else went, but it was just one of them things. You did what they said. That was it.
Wasn't a lot of emotion involved, huh?
Not really.
Just went with it.
Yeah.
How were a lot of the? I'm sure there were quite a few guys that you knew that went over there.
Oh yeah.
How was that for them and coming back?
Oh, the ones I knew, I think it probably put kind of a pretty lasting effect on them, you know. I went to school with some of them that never made it back. Max Knudsen was behind me in school. He got killed over there. My cousin's wife and Big Sandy, he died over there in a helicopter. So I knew a few that never came back.
What were all those guys like when you were going to school?
Well, it was kind of different to me from when I went to school, because I went to country school for 8 years. And first 4 years at Frenchman school, and then 4 years at Valleytown before I ever went into high school. When I started high school in Saco, it was kind of a shock, because I went from a school with 2 of us in school to there was probably close. When I started school in Saco, I would assume there was almost 200 kids in school
Oh, wow.
in Saco.
So Saco must have been quite a bit larger than Hinsdale at that point.
I think there was 80, 90 kids in high school when I was a freshman.
So why was Saco so much bigger at that point, but now we're pretty much the same, give or take a year?
I have no idea. I guess it's just
Was the country over there a little bit? Was it a little easier to survive the Dust Bowl? Were there a few more farmers around at that point?
I think there was more small, there were small places. Everybody had a little place, and now there's no little places to hardly speak of. They're all gobbled up, where you had 20 people ranching different farms and ranches. Now you got 2.
Yeah.
So everybody's all consolidated into one outfit. And the gas company had Seiko always had a kind of a gas company crew.
So was that a much larger endeavor at that point, much more labor intensive, so there were more people it could support?
Yeah, I imagine, yeah.
So you mentioned both the French Creek School and the Valleytown School. Was the Valleytown School pretty close to the dam then?
Yeah, just right below the dam.
Because that's where the old crossing and the little,
Yep.
I guess, quote, town site, I don't think it was
Yep.
much.
There was the old, when I was little, there was the post office and store, a little store was there. The Whitbridge run the little store when I don't even remember, but they were still.
So where was the Frenchtown School then? Was that farther south?
Further south, it was right straight west of where Brian and Becky Johnston lived, just on the west side of the creek.
Nathan Camp's place. Okay.
Yeah.
So back then, where did the communities feel like kind of the dividing line was between Hinsdale and Seiko? Because Valleytown and Genevieve are both ghost towns, but they're not that far away, and it seems like one kind of goes one way and one goes the other. But on the other hand, I know you go back far enough, there was another one of those little country stores at Genevieve,
Yeah.
but it went through Seiko.
Well, I don't know. Of course, back then travel was slower. I mean, you didn't get very far. I mean, as far as knowing people, we knew the Mogans and the Johnsons and Arnolds, but we'd go to Genevieve for card parties and stuff like that, and so you got acquainted, but you never went much further than that. I mean, I guess when I was going to grade school, you went to Seiko. We did, because we was closer to Seiko, but you didn't go very often. And I can remember coming to Hinsdale in the summertime. They had the rodeo out here, west of town. Yeah, we'd end up at Tinney every once in a while. They'd have a dance or something at Tinney, but that was, as far as coming into Hinsdale, we just didn't do it very often until I got into high school.
Was Teeny pretty much still a ghost town at that point? Just had the
No,
had a hall, or
when I was growing up, we used to go up there. Hal, Olphus ran the store. Yeah.
oh, there was still a store at Teeny at that point.
Yeah. Yep.
So it must have closed in the early '50s then, I'm guessing.
I would have to say they closed the store sometime in the 50s. I can't tell you exactly, but I know the winters, really tough winters back in the 49 and 50 when Frank Locke was flying the mail up there, that the store was still open yet then.
So you mentioned rodeo, and obviously that's kind of been a big part of your guys' lives.
It has been for a long time, yeah.
What kind of sparked your passion for rodeo?
Well, I guess I've been interested in bucking horses my whole life. My dad raised them, and he used to pick up for these rodeos here. And we've been involved in the horse business for many years. I rode horseback to school for 8 years. The first 4 was 6 miles, and the last 4 was 3.5 miles. So I rode almost every day to school, horseback.
Did you have a favorite horse growing up?
Oh, I had several of them, but I had a little Shetland stud I started on that Frank Locke gave me. And I rode him for 3 years before I went to a little bigger horse, and then kept graduating up to a bigger one.
You know, I'm sure the sport has changed at least a little bit over the years. What What did a rodeo look like then versus now? Was it kind of the same events in the same way?
It's about almost everything's the same almost. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything that you miss about the way it used to be done?
Not really, I guess. It's just
Rodeo's a rodeo.
Rodeo's a rodeo.
It's always a good time.
Some are good and some are bad, but they're all interesting, most of them.
Yeah. I remember reading, Bear Eaton had wrote in a little bit of the history. You mentioned the rodeo when it was west of town. He
Yep.
wrote a little bit of history, some of that. I think there was a slightly different mentality from the spectators. He said that the rodeos that stood out the best and were the most applauded were the ones where someone hurt or maybe even died. So evidently it was a little rougher.
And I think it's still kind of that way. People go to kind of like going to a car race. They don't go to really watch the race. They go to watch the rack.
That's probably true. So obviously you guys traveled around a lot and met a lot of different people. When was the first time that you left home for an extended period?
Oh, I graduated from high school in 1960, and I went to work at the D-High, running a swather. That's from 6 at night till 6 in the morning. And I worked there for 2 summers. And yes, then I worked a little for Phillips County for 2 or 3 years. And how I kind of ended up around Hinsdale is I'd winter cows for Harvey Jones for about 3 years. I'd go up there and work in the winter time. And that's when I got in here, and then I went to work for Frank Jensen for running cat scraper and stuff for him for 3-4 years.
Gotcha.
4 years, back in the middle 60s.
You mentioned Seiko D-High, and I know where the name came from, but I'm just going to put it on camera because I think a lot of people just take it for granted. They got the name because it was an alfalfa dehydration plant back in the day, right?
Yep.
So all the Seiko flats, I'm assuming, was anything that could raise alfalfa, they were, so they could put through the plant probably, huh?
Yeah, they never raised that flat. Doesn't raise a lot of alfalfa. Usually there was a
Not quite that far.
chunk of ground out by Nelson Reservoir that Timber Woods had, and it was kind of below the reservoir there, and they had it into alfalfa. That flat, the Seiko flat, doesn't raise very good alfalfa. It's that gumbo.
It just always stayed dry land, basically.
And then we put up a lot of hay out here where Steve Laycock lives, when Bill Mastonin had it.
Oh, they would haul it that far still.
Yeah, we hayed all that. And Melvin Wolf would run the chopper, and I run the swather. We run, when they're in the season, we'd run 7 days a week.
Wow.
We had 12-hour shifts.
So was most of that staying local, or was that getting loaded on trains? And
No, they're all stayed local. They'd store it and make cake out of it. They made a lot of cake out of the Seiko D-High for years and years, cow cake.
Yeah, too far from the General Mills plant to get wheat mids, I guess, so it made sense.
Well, at that time, it was barley cake with D-High in it, you know.
So when did the dehydration stop?
I would have to say probably in the late 60s.
Oh,
I think it got too expensive, the natural gas. I mean, they dehydrated with natural gas, and it got a little higher and higher.
well, it's Seiko. It should just be free.
Yeah. But they were working off of, I think, MDUOLs, and the electricity was, that old equipment was pretty old, and I forget how much they charged when to start one of them big motors. Them big, huge electric motors were pretty expensive to run.
So it must have had at least a 15-year run over there. I can't imagine it was doing a lot during World War II.
Well, the D-High never came in until, I don't think they moved that in there till the late 50s.
Oh, okay. So it maybe wasn't all that long.
Yeah.
5-some years then, huh?
I can't exactly tell you, but it was somewhere in the late 50s, because it was It was running when I was in high school, but it hadn't been there very long. They moved it in from someplace, Nebraska or somewhere. We moved it up there. So all the equipment was kind of old at that time.
Yeah. So on the home place growing up, did you guys do mostly cattle and hay? Were you guys doing some grain farming? Kind of what was?
Oh, he farmed just a little bit, not very much. It was just cows and hay.
Yeah. Were they mostly Herefords still at that time?
Yeah, we ran pretty all Herefords, and my dad ran cows on shares with Sid Funk for several years. They were all Hereford cows.
So when did that really start switching over? Because obviously there's not a lot of Herefords running around anymore.
No, of course, Sid, he had a lot of cattle, and he ran, kept a lot of different people ran. John Barton ran Funk cows. A lot of people run cows with Sid Funk on shares and got started in the cow business, that way. And most of them went, first black cow I ever seen was probably back in the 50s, late 50s. It was Claire Duncan. The only black cow in the country. The rest of them were all Herefords.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that name come up. He's evidently must have been one of the big cattlemen for quite a while.
Yeah, he only owns had black cows up where Clinton Cox lives, and Claire, I don't know when he bought them, but I mean, that's first back in the 50s, late 40s, 50s, in there, he got started in the black cow business, and he was the only black cows I know of, and now I don't know if there's a Hereford cow left in the country.
I think Brady might have had a couple there for a while, but that was about the last that I saw. There's still some nice Hereford genetics in the state, but... Well,
I think Matthews runs Frankie Jensen had a few Hereford cows. There are a few there, but there are pretty few of them.
Yeah. I don't ever remember running Herefords, but I do remember some of those black baldy cows, and man, that was a nice mother cow.
Yeah.
So when did you meet Jan?
Oh, I was working south of Malta with Doug Martin. He was managing the George Robinson Ranch for an outfit out of Kansas, and 1970, 72, I guess, 71, yeah, 72, the summer of 72, and she came up and was staying with Bill and Bernice Rowe, who lived right next to where Doug and Shirley lived.
So who chased who?
Oh, I don't know. I guess there was probably equal parts. You'd have to ask her for sure, but
gotta make sure your story's straight, right?
Yeah.
So what was life like after that?
Well, I moved to Winnett in the fall of 72, and fall of 71, and they hired me to take over the Two Crow Ranch, manage the Two Crow Ranch. Now a couple of guys out of Kansas owned it, and they owned the stuff south of Malta, so they sent me over there. Mainly because I had an airplane and could fly. That was my reason to go over there. And then we was married in spring of 1973, or June, and we was there till 1998 on the Two Crow.
That's quite a time to be out there. I can actually say that I've driven into the yard. I did that here a month or so ago and took some pictures, and it's a large chunk and it's quite a spread, but you have to make sure you're wanting to go out there because it's not for the faint of heart. That's quite a drive.
Yeah, it was a neat place. There was about 185,000 acres in it. There was very little there when I got there, just an old house and a barn, and pretty everything that was there now. Well, I guess there's not much left now because they're tearing it down. But all the corrals and the house and all the barn and hangar and everything we put up, built most of it while we were there.
So how did you run an operation like that? Obviously, it's very spread out, very rangy. Where is it? Winter grazing? Was there hay put up? Kind of how did you run a cow operation like that?
We ran yearlings for many, probably the first 10, 12 years, probably 10, 12 years I was there, we ran old yearlings. We just summer, they'd come in April, they'd be gone by the 1st November.
Well, that makes it a lot simpler because I was trying to figure out how in the world you'd ever find hay ground up there.
Well, there's no hay ground, there's no farm ground. We didn't put up any hay or farm anything. We'd buy all our hay, but we didn't usually use much. And then as 1979, the guy outfit out of California bought it, and he was a rich multi-millionaire, but he didn't really know nothing about the cattle business. We ended up keeping a bunch of heifers and slowly went into just straight cows on it. And we was the only outfit in the country. We had a 12-month permit. I mean, we could graze all winter long. We very seldom ever fed hay. Usually just run on grass.
Yeah. So how was it getting in and out of there? Obviously, the airplane probably helped quite a bit because I'm assuming that road wasn't very well maintained with gravel.
Well, it wasn't, probably, but the best thing when the road was bad, we didn't have the traffic problems either that we did because of the boat ramp. I mean, the Crooked Creek Recreation Area was not one of the best things that ever happened to the ranch. The road went right through the middle of it. And you can get to town if you want to. You know, it was 4-wheel drive a lot of times, but you could always make it. The only thing in the winter time, in the 1978 and 79, we never got out of there for months at a time. Our oldest one was born in 78, in November. He got sick in December or January, I guess it was, and we had to take the cat. And I started at 4 o'clock in the morning and plowing, and the county was coming out of Lewis or Roy met us with about 5.5 hours getting 12 miles before we got to where the county met us. We got into Lewistown, and by that time he was coming out of it, so we stayed at a motel at Lewistown, the B&B, for 3 nights. It snowed 36 inches in 3 days in Lewistown. We got home and the county plowed us back in. We was there till sometime in April before it finally opened up where we get it out of there first part of April. There was a lot of snow that winter.
So how was it raising kids and a family up there where you're pretty well isolated? I was assuming the closest neighbors were Iversons at that point. And
Iversons and Jacksons, well, Esseses were closest to us, but it was, we just never thought about it.
You'd all grown up that way anyway.
Yeah.
I would assuming that it was probably almost a little reminiscent of how you grew up, just a lot more trees.
Yeah. Well, when I grew up north of Thaco, there'd be times we'd never get to town, maybe once in the winter. The snow was back in the 49, 48, 49, 50 in there, them tough winters, you just didn't go no place. You stayed home. 40, I think it was 48 or 40, winter 48 and 49, and I was going to school at Frenchman, and I was staying with the teacher. And one morning we got up and the stove fuel wouldn't even run out of the tank into the way 50 some below. My dad rode in there horseback. Teacher, no car, no phone, no electricity. And he went over and got Stan Garthite. And Stan come and got the teacher, and I got on the horse behind my dad, and we went home. They just closed school for the rest of the winter and never went back to school all winter.
Well, it's probably a good thing if there's no heat. Yeah. So it must have been pretty cold to have frozen that fuel.
Yeah, it was a little tough. Tough. And, they kept from freezing to death. There was just a little wood trash burner in the teacherage. Most of them old schools were pretty small, but no insulation or anything in them. Yeah.
So growing up, did most people already have some utilities, or were there people, without phone, electricity, water? Everyone still have the outhouse?
We never got electricity till, if I remember right, I think electricity came in '56 or '57, where we lived.
That was probably pretty late for electricity for some of
We
the
was
areas.
one of the last ones to get it. We was kind of between the Big Flat and the Valley Electric. The Valley comes into where Stan Garthite lived, and then Big Flat was to the north where Bergholz are, and in there.
Kind of ended up in a.
So we kind of ended up in an area where the last ones, and I don't think we had a phone until. I don't think the phone came until sometime in the early '60s. We never had a phone all the time I was in high school.
Really? That's interesting, because usually the phone could come in first because it had enough power to run it.
Yeah, no,
That's amazing.
I can't remember sure, but if I remember right, it was in the early '60s before we ever got a phone.
Well, I can imagine. I would think it probably wasn't a whole lot of fun trying to get utilities up into the Frenchman country. Soil doesn't really cooperate. So if you didn't have electricity, did you guys have to have an ice house, or was just everything
Nope.
canned and dry goods?
Nope, they put everything in ice, put up ice in the winter, and then at that time, one of the first things my dad he loved. I had to have iced tea. He bought a propane refrigerator.
Oh.
We had a propane refrigerator for years.
We found a workaround.
Yep, but before that, they put up ice all the time. I put it in an old ice house and put it in there and cover it with sawdust and straw.
Yeah. What do you think about those old methods of running the house versus all the conveniences we have today?
Well, most people probably couldn't survive with in the old time, and back then you never give it a thought. Little old kerosene Aladdin lamp we thought was the brightest thing in the world until Coleman lanterns come out, and then it was really bright.
So was your mom a good cook?
Yes, my mother was a very good cook. Yeah, she fed a lot of people.
Did you have a lot of crews that she would have to cook for large groups?
Oh, you see, of course, there was always somebody at our house. I think one month she kept track. She fed like 60-some different people in a month.
Really? Just people passing
Yeah,
through,
just
or
people stop and visit.
you're just kind of the
We had a
way
couple.
for people to go, huh?
We had a couple old bachelors live up in the northwest of us. So Erickson brothers, Carl and Pee Wee Erickson, and pretty near every Sunday they come and have dinner with us. Yeah.
I've heard quite a few stories about old bachelors and cow punchers. Was that something that was left over from like the range days, that they had been range riders and just never married and never settled down, and they just kind of kept what they call working the chow line like they did back in the day, or kind of where did that group of guys come from?
Most of them just were. There wasn't very many of them left when I was raised, because they were gone. I mean, the bigger outfits were gone, at that time. The 30s kind of shifted things around quite a bit. But most of them guys, like Johnny Valentine, he worked for Claire Duncan and ran summer herds for different outfits. There was a few around. Old Lou Bakke worked up, I can remember him. But there wasn't very many of them guys around when I started out. They were pretty much all settled down someplace.
Were there ever any sheep in the country, or was that pretty much done because of the 30s as well?
The Bartons, when I was young, Bartons had sheep. And they were the biggest band of sheep that I know of. I can't think. There were probably a few people had the small ones, but that was the only big sheep outfit that I can remember being right there. And they quit the sheep sometime in the 50s and went to cows.
So what about all the horses? I've heard that there was a pretty good bunch of wild horses running around at one point because, well, between the Dust Bowl and the drought and the fact that tractors came around, there was a lot of draft stock that just didn't really have much use anymore and just kind of got turned loose.
I think a lot of the horses came from people in the 30s when they went broke. They just walked off and left them. And like the Wright brothers, they had a lot of horses, and Henry Hendrickson, there was horses. And the 40s, and I think Frank Locke told me shipped 20-some thousand head of horses out of this country. They all went to kill plants in Los Angeles and California down in there.
Jeez.
So they kind of cleaned them up. They was running everywhere. My dad said in the 30s, a lot of them, that's what kept a lot of people alive, was horse meat.
Did that seem to affect people long term? Obviously, this area was hit pretty hard by it. The ones that made it through just helped each other and made it work.
I think they just made it work, survived. Everything people got used to it. I mean, it just. My dad said they lived as good in the 30s as they did later on. They'd take work teams and work on WPA reservoirs and stuff like that. Then they didn't spend much. They didn't have money to spend, and they didn't spend much. But he said, as far as their life was probably as good as it was before or after.
So you talked about working on the two crow and running that. How did an operation like of that size get put together?
Well, it was mainly the two crow was started by a guy that was Tony Weingart. He was the one that started the whole thing. He had that whole partner the whole country, and then he sold out to Rankin, Wellington Rankin, back in, I'm gonna say late 50s, 58, 50, right in there sometime. And Rankin had it. And I was working for Frank and Reen Locke on the north side of the river at that time, in the early 60s, right out in the winter after I graduated from high school. And Rankin, it was pretty dry. He had all those convicts working for him.
Oh.
And then there was the Headmans. Well, then when Rankin sold it, he sold it to, not with my name, Savage Brothers. And they kind of put a couple of smaller places together. Otherwise, the whole thing was pretty much old Tony Weingart that started it. And his family still lives there to the south of us.
I was going to say, that name sounds familiar. You go past Iverson's to get down to them, don't you?
They go to, Weingarts lived right down there. Casey, the boy, Bob and Pat were our really good friends. And their son Casey runs it all now. Now their grandson is the one that was running cattle on the Tucaro. Has bought some stuff around there.
Gotcha. And that ranch, basically the north boundary was the Missouri, right?
Lake to the north, Missouri River to the north, and the Mussel Shell on the east. It kind of sat in almost a square, 16-mile square.
Yeah. So there was a rugged country, and it's hard to get to by land, but that area actually had some of the earliest history for the area, with all the steamboats going up and down and the woodhawks. Was there still evidence of that?
Well, there was an old ferry across there. The ferry cable that they ferried, it was laying along the shore there for years. It's probably still there. And they had the wood where they loaded the wood on the steamboats. It was right there at the mouth of the Mussel. And
there were still some wood piles?
No.
Oh, you could just tell where.
And then there was the old Fort Mussel Shell, the military fort was there.
Was there still evidence of where that fort was?
Not really, it's all underwater, but there was a grave, there's a grave up on the hillside. They moved out of the river bottom and moved it up on the hillside there where one of them soldiers was killed there. I can't even remember the exact year, but back in the 1860 something or 70 something.
I think 1860s was kind of the very end of that. I've been reading into a lot of that. The part that I found really interesting was the fact that it was Fort Musselshell, and then that died off because obviously the steamboat stopped coming.
Yeah.
And then it was an outlaw hideout until, Granville Stewart went in there and lynched a bunch of them. And then like right before all those buildings fell in, I think some N-bar men were actually wintering up there and running cows, and I think Harry Rudder and Teddy Blue actually both wrote about trying to stay the winter up there. And that just has always fascinated me, that country.
Yeah, up on by Chain Buttes is where there's a little Henry Hedman had a place there, and that was an N-bar line camp.
Oh, really?
Up there where Henry lived.
Yeah. That's cool that there's still those little traces of that, because that was just a different way to run cattle back then.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody ran. I mean, it's hard to realize the difference between this country and that country. I could run 2,000 head of cows down there for what it costs to run 300 up here.
Yeah.
Because we hardly ever fed hay.
Yeah, you drive around and it feels very similar, but you can tell that it is just, the soil's a little different, the water's a little different, the grass is a little different.
Well, it takes less rain out there to raise grass than it does here. It's not as good a grass out there as it is here, but an inch of rain at the right time along that river will make quite a difference. And the clover, that country can be solid clover at times.
Mm-hmm. So was the Square Butte Grazing Association to your south when you were over there?
They moved in there and bought the Estison place instead, Bub Nunn's, probably in early 90s. They have 94, 95 in there somewhere.
Did that seem like a good group?
They seemed all right. I got along with them.
You know, how was relationship with ranchers? I know sometimes when you're on a place that's owned by out-of-state interests, that there can be clickiness.
I guess that was one of my goals when I worked for 4 different people that owned that ranch while I was there. And if I didn't have neighbors, I wouldn't have had nothing. I got along with all my neighbors. It was a little hard. It's not the California mentality didn't work, you know. You have to have neighbors or you ain't gonna survive. Mm-hmm. And I could call any neighbor I had if I needed help, and they'd be there the next morning to help us. We very seldom had over maybe one hired man. In the summer I might have 2 helping us ride, but otherwise there's just 2 of us there till my boys got old enough to start riding and jam. Neighbors are a big thing. If you don't get along with your neighbors, you're not going to survive. But when I called, like Weingart's, I'd have 3 people there the next morning helping me. But when they called, I went and helped them too. So,
well, I would say that your efforts were definitely a success. Whenever I tell people from Hinsdale, I get one of 2 responses. Either they know you guys through rodeo and they absolutely adore you, or they knew you from the Winnet community and they absolutely adore you.
Yeah, we got by pretty good.
Yeah. So I know I told Jan this, I'm not sure if I told you or not, I'm actually working with Brenda Atchison Curry at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
So how long were her and her dad up there at Two Crow with you guys?
Oh, I think he worked for me for probably 3 years. When she must have been, she was in high school when they left there. She had a couple of years in high school, I think, when she left. It's probably 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. Were your boys still around at that point?
Now, Brett started school and she used to drive to the mailbox with him and get on the bus. Then after she left, they run the bus right up to the door.
That must have been quite a bus ride.
Yeah, it was 35 miles the short way and 40 some miles the long way. They went one way and come back the other. They switched every once in a while.
I don't know the last time you were up there. I was up there early this spring, and there's a lot of hunting cabins up there now, all to the west of.
Yeah, that all came in after we left there. I've been through there a time or two, but there was nothing there when I was there, when we lived there.
So when you left Two Crow, what was your next life adventure? Where did life take you?
Oh, we ended up at least Ross Robinson's for 9 years. There west of Seco. We had about 300 cows and we left with it. And happened to run into Ross and he was getting ready to retire, so he leased us the place. We stayed there till he got ready to sell it.
Yeah, so born and raised and went to school in Seco. How was it retiring in Hinsdale?
Oh, I'd always been kind of part of Hinsdale, I knew just many people in Hinsdale that did in Seco, I guess, and like Johnny Arnold and him, we were kids together, growing up, the Genevieve community around him, so probably more at home here. Of course, I worked for Frank Jensen for 5-6 years right here. Got pretty well acquainted.
Mm-hmm. So what was any big changes from when you left the area? I mean, I'm sure you visited frequently, but from living here to then spending a good chunk of time south of the river and coming back, were there any big changes?
Well, yeah, you get out of here and get away from the mosquitoes and then come back. Quite a blow to have to come back to mosquitoes.
Now, where did Jan grow up?
Northeast Oklahoma.
And how the heck did you convince her to... I mean, it was a feat to convince her to live at Two Crow and raise a family. How the heck did you convince her to come to mosquito country?
I didn't ask her.
Just along for the
we
ride.
We had to go someplace, so that was, you kind of go where the opportunities are. Yeah.
So you guys have done a lot of rodeos in your life, and you're still doing a lot of them. Which town puts on some of the best rodeos? What's your favorite one that you're always excited to go to?
Probably the best rodeo we go to, and as far as what we're involved in, is White Sulphur. White Sulphur's there are a bunch of people that are kind of got together and pretty gung-ho, and it's one of the biggest rodeos in Montana that we help produce. Lewistown's huge, the crowd-wise, but the most fun and really kind of fun people is White Sulphur. And that's where we'll be going this coming week. So,
yeah. What could all the other rodeos take away from the ones that are having that success? What could they improve?
Well, rodeos getting to be a tough deal for these little rodeos in Montana. Are going to have a terrible time surviving because there's so much money up anymore. The good guys are only going to go where there's money. And Glasgow, Chinook, all these little rodeos, it's really going to hurt them.
So the hardest thing is just getting contestants there, really, it sounds like.
Yeah.
The biggest thing.
You've got, in the PRCA, you've got, I'm going to guesstimate, but I'd say you have 150 card-carrying PRCA saddle bronc riders. You've got 75 PRCA bareback riders. There's several thousand rodeos in the United States, all competing for that number of people. The timed event's different. You have oodles of timed event people, but
the rough stock is
rough
limited.
stock. Every rodeo in the United States is competing for that small amount of people. we'll go to Four Bears at first part of October to the bronc riding to Brad Germanson, and they're going to add somewhere between $165,000 and $200,000
Oh wow.
at that bronc ride. Pretty hard. Nobody else is going to compete with them.
So basically, all of the contestants are following the money, and
Yep,
that's going to determine where
they're going to
the
go where
rodeo
the,
succeeds.
they're going to go where the money is. If you don't add 15, 20,000 per event, you're not going to get them. They're not going to come.
It's not like the good old days where guys are willing to hop on rough stack on
They're over
the risk of getting hurt for the thrill of it. They have to make a living at it now, huh?
Yep. Yeah, they can. The other day at Rapid City, that Wells boy from Powell, Wyoming, won $38,000 in one day.
It's hard to pass that up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to hurt these small town rodeos, but that's the way it is, I guess.
In your opinion, what event is the king of rodeo? What
Saddle
really
bronc ride.
Saddle bronc?
Yeah.
Goes all the way back to the roots. The bulls are fun, but real cowboying started by breaking horses, huh?
Yep. Yeah. And bull riding is, I mean, I don't know how the people can ride some of them bulls. They're getting to be so. Bulls, everybody used to have a bullet or two that buck. Now they haul semi-loads of them down the road to buck.
It's a different world than just pulling one of them wild horses off the range, and I think that
That's the thing. All bygone era anymore. They're all everything's bred for a purpose.
I read a few stories that quite a few of the broncs in the area came out of south of Hinsdale and south of Seiko, that they would round them up. I think even when they had that big boxing match over in Shelby back in the day, there was a rodeo that went alongside it, and I think they trailed them all the way from the Larb Hills area out there for the rodeo.
Yeah, there's horses all over this country back in the 30s, I guess, and but anymore it's all, everybody's got a breeding program. There's picking up one that's not bred that way is pretty slim odds anymore. It used to be odds were, you could take 100 of them, maybe get 5 or 6 that was really good out of them. Now, if you're not breeding for it, they pan out.
So over the years, who were some of the best people that you met through rodeo?
Oh, that's kind of hard to say. I've met so many people that.
A little loaded question, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be hard to really come up with. Just known some really nice people for a long time.
Are there any big memories or events in your life that really seem to be a pivotal point in your life, or something that you still think about a lot to this day?
Oh, not nothing real pivotal, I guess, that I could come up with anything special. I mean,
Just a life well lived with a lot of good people and a lot of good cows and horses.
Yep. I've had a few good horses and a couple good dogs, and a family and wife and kids, and I guess that's probably about as exciting a goal as you can meet.
Yeah. What were holidays like throughout your childhood and raising kids?
Well, when I was growing up, we'd usually go to my grandmother's in Seiko for Christmas or what, and that was kind of a big deal, but other than that, holidays weren't very important to us, anybody. I mean, there'd be, when you were little, Christmas was exciting. I can remember Johnny Valentine was living with us when I was little, and he was breaking horses, and I learned a few cuss words from him. And I got up on Christmas morning, and he kept telling me I was going to get nothing for Christmas, and I had a stick of firewood in my sock was the only thing that I had. But he gave me a pair of Crockett spurs, and I still have them to this day.
That sounds like a pretty special present.
Yeah.
What was it like? I know you guys weren't on the place anymore, but what was the thoughts going through your head when Two Crow sold?
Well, I did everything that I could do to keep it from selling. Kind of trying to work against the guy that owned it. He didn't understand what he thought he was doing, a great thing for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Rich people dance to a different drummer than anybody else, and we could have got it stopped, but we had one county commissioner over there that didn't agree with and convinced, and the lawyer from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation sat right at this table and thought the commissioners had been against it, would have never sold. But it was a kind of a hit to that county. I mean, took quite a bit of tax base out of the county because the cattle and what little machinery kept 3 or 4 kids in school. And, we fought it and couldn't get it stopped. Now with the American Prairie Foundation owning it, well, it's really history now. I don't think anything very promising looking in this country anymore with them around, because they're going to force everybody out.
Yeah, they've put quite a spread together. It doesn't seem like they've...
Money's not a problem for them, and so they can kind of do what they want. Bad, it's sure not good for any of the country. Personally, I don't think any of these out-of-staters that come in are any good for the country, because they could care less what they spend here. They pay a few taxes and that's it. Got several of them around here that they sure aren't doing our country any good here.
So what do you think the future of ranching in rural Montana is going to be like?
Bring them any young people in it. Can't afford it. I mean, it looks like heaven right now, but we know it ain't going to stay this way.
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody can get started in business. There's just no way they'll ever own land, because there's people that are going to pay 10 times what it's worth just to have it. I don't know. I predicted for years that there's just going to be a big park in this country anyway.
Well, there are some people that's on their agenda.
That's what they're trying to do. And with all this government land scattered through it, there's not much. And then these big outfits, out of staters come in and buy all this up. Who else can afford it but the government? So they'll end up, will be just like they're in Canada in the grasslands. There won't be nobody left in it.
Yeah.
Which is not good, but that's the way it goes. No people left here, and very little deeded land and scattered around, and not any way to stop them.
Well, are there any other stories you'd like to tell, or any other people you'd like to reminisce on?
Oh, I don't really think so, I guess, pretty much. My memory getting to where I'm half the time trying to remember somebody's name anyway.
I'm just trying to remember yesterday. I got 2 toddlers at home. I don't know what weighs up.
Yeah.
Well, I sure appreciate it, Dick. I enjoyed this.
Yeah.
It's always nice to see kind of how everyone else went through life, and it's fun to see how a lot of people did it the same, and then other people made a couple different choices and got to have a whole different adventure.
Yeah.
And that was a really fun thing I got to do this summer. When I knew I had to go knock on some doors at Winnett, and I was like, well, I'm going to go at least as far as Iverson's, and I'm like, I'm this far. I'm going to go drive up there and take some pictures just to say that I've been on Two Crow, because that was a big name for a long time, and like you said, there might not be much there very soon.
It was a big ranch, and it was a good ranch. The only thing wrong with it, it was too much government land. I mean, there was only 22,000 acres of deed land. The rest of it was all government land. So one thing I didn't miss when I did leave, there was fighting with some government employee.
Yeah, I can understand that.
We had some good ones though while we were there. There was a couple, 3 or 4 of them guys that was really good to get along with.